Welcome to our podcast. The better you are, the better you are. Whether it is physically, mentally, or spiritually, when you know better, you can do better. And when you do better, you'll be better. On this podcast, we share knowledge, expertise, opinions, and experiences. All things that can help you to change the game. By the time we're done, it's hard for you not to be encouraged. So join us. The better you are, the better you are.
Tracy Boyd is an Indiana native and passionate advocate for education equity. She's dedicated her life to public service, and after earning her bachelor's degree in education from Martin University, she spent over a decade as a technical support analyst for a pharmaceutical research company before stepping into public life by running for the office in the city of Lawrence. Tracy's leadership shines through in her current roles as executive assistant to the Center Township Trustee and chair of the Lawrence Utility Service Board. Service and empowerment have been the cornerstone of Tracy's adult life as a dedicated public servant. And in 2020, during a critical election cycle in Indiana and the pandemic, she recognized a vital need. Many voters were unaware of their fundamental rights. With a vision for change, Tracy launched the Get Out and Vote initiative, which has since evolved into the Get Out and Vote Now, GovNow project. Under her leadership, the initiative continues to focus on both voter registration and education, ensuring a more informed and engaged electorate. Tracy's commitment to service and the betterment of her community remains at the heart of every effort she leads, and we are very blessed to have her with us today to talk about voting and voters' rights and the importance of voting. How are you, Tracy?
I'm doing great. Good morning. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for having me as a guest this morning. I feel really honored to be with you.
Thank you for being here. I thought I'd start out just by talking about, a few historical facts, a few statistics. I was reading the other day that in 2023, only 50% of young people 18 to 24, and actually you could even extend that out to age 35, voted or vote. And so I want to help talk about the importance of voting and the how you register and things of that sort. But I thought, if you don't know your past, you can't know your future. I thought it's important to start with our history. And we all know that for people of color, Black people in the United States, we didn't have the right to vote or even considered to be free until 1865. And then after that, while we thought we might have the right to vote, it turned out that there were a lot of legislation and state-related mandates and restrictions that kept Black people from voting. They had things like how many bubbles are in a bar of soap, or how many marbles are in this jar, that people had to pass these arbitrary tests before they could have the right to vote. Do you want to speak about that at all, or do you have any?
Well, I know that the litmus tests that you're talking about were completely unfair. I did discover some information over the years, more recently, that there was a tiff between Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass. And Susan B. Anthony thought he should support her so that white women could have the right to vote. And he felt that it was a life or death situation, that Black men should have the right to vote. And there was some disagreement about which was more urgent. And so I found that to be very interesting. I feel the winner of the civil rights movement, hope it's appropriate to say this, is white women more so than African-American or Blacks. So
yeah, from what I understand, and I was telling you earlier, I wish I had thought to have my husband on here because he could spit it out much more eloquently and accurately than I can. But I was, growing up, I remember voting my first vote with my mom, and I was young and I was standing behind her, and I did not understand at that time that her mother and perhaps even her, as she was growing up, did not have the right to vote. It's something I took for granted. And that in 1920, women got the right to vote.
Mhm.
But Black women didn't get the right to vote until 1965, even though they were very instrumental into the suffrage fight for voting. They were like, "Oh, you can be in this fight with us, but you have to stand at the back because we don't
Correct.
want Black women out here." And I know that the Delta sorority was very instrumental in that, and that Frederick Douglass, was
Mhm.
very instrumental in stating that it is important that all people be able to vote. Fannie Lou Hamer, who stood
That's
up and
correct.
said, "Ain't I a woman?" And
Yes,
can't,
famously, yes.
and I'm sick and tired of being sick and
Sick and
tired.
tired.
And then, John Lewis and his efforts, and the young people who died in Alabama, for our right to vote. And so, for me, that's part of the importance of voting is knowing that people died for my right to vote. And sometimes I hear people say, well, my vote's not going to count. It's just
Mhm.
one person. It's not going to make a difference. What thoughts and comments do you have related to that?
You bring up several powerful points. I got a reality check when I was in the community in the 2020 zone and still currently now. You mentioned the age group of 18 to maybe 34-ish. They're not motivated, and I want to say it in truth, but I want to say it with lots of sensitivity. They're not motivated by John Lewis. They're not motivated by Dr. King. They kind of feel like we were going soft or old. I'm trying to just kind of think about the language that was used, and it did not resonate with them. But I think a missed point regarding voting is young people don't realize that they're taxpayers. And so when they step out of the voting cycle, that's the voice that you have. And they would tell me it doesn't matter what schools my kids are going to get a good education, whether the school is good or not. I don't agree with that. They don't care if they have good roads. I said the whole public health, everything is tied to voting. So just having a respectful conversation and just having aha moments throughout the conversation. One young person said we didn't do anything when Trayvon Martin was murdered. And I did not connect that to voting, but they connected that to voting. So finding out what is important, particularly to 18 to 32 or 34-year-olds, is significant because I know we won't win the race in November without those people, the Gen X and the millennials. So those are some of the thoughts that come to mind. And just finding out what is important to our young people, respecting that, and inviting them in to say they would like to participate in this way or that way, and not use our old model, if you will, to say everybody should join us. This is what we've been doing. We don't always get the results we want because this is what we've been doing also.
I think you make some excellent points. And it's not about vote for who I think you should vote for. It's about vote
It's
because
not.
you have some
Yes.
rights and your voice should be heard. And I don't, I know that some people are often embarrassed or shamed, or people try to shame them. You haven't voted since da 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 da. It's not about shaming. It's about understanding. As you point out, there are government bodies well below the level of president, and down to our city levels that affect
Absolutely.
when my child goes to school, how they're treated and what goes on. And when you look at things, as I give lectures on implicit bias and other things, you look at how young people of color are treated in grade school all the way up. All those social determinants of health, affect their outcomes. And it's back at those levels where we need to have a voice to have what we want, and be heard. And then again, I do think back, people died for that right, and I don't want
Absolutely.
to take it for granted. And I want to, if I'm going to complain, and I will, then I need to have my voice heard, at least as that I did get out and vote. So I think those are all important things. Maybe I know you ran for office. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the things that we might not think are important or not even know,
Mhm.
that are might affect us in our everyday lives, that are offices that people vote on. And then how do you find out information about those offices and who's running and who you want to vote for? And, are there websites, social media, how do you
Mhm.
research those?
That's a wonderful question. I would say that at a very ground level, I'm a precinct chairperson for my community. That's probably at the lowest level of service on an elected official. So I serve in that capacity. What is also connected in all communities is a Democratic club, and they meet several times a year, and they will say these are, you get to vote on special elections. Let me get back to precinct committee person. So if there's a special election, the precinct committee people are the only people that vote on that particular campaign or election, if you will, because they're in that status of precinct committee person. If someone gets sick or passes away, that will create a special election. If there's foul play and someone is removed or impeached, that will create a special election. So that those are some of the benefits. But I'm also responsible for door knocking in my community and saying, hey, we have an election coming up. Are you registered to vote? Did you move? Did you get married? Did you change your name or gender? Those are reasons immediately that we would have to update your voter registration status. You can do that electronically. You can do it by paper. I have QR codes when people give me the energy that they don't want to talk to me. I was like, oh, well, scan this code and then take care of your business when it's convenient for you. And I keep it moving. And of course, you want to be safe with door knocking as well. So those are some of the things that are my responsibility as a precinct committee person chair. The way that you find out information about who may be running for office, what is their platform, general education around this office is here, these people are there. In terms of elected officials, one thing that I think is a huge missed opportunity is we don't reach out to I say public servants, but I know they're elected officials. We don't reach out and say, hey, can we talk? Can we have coffee? I have a question about this, or something happened in the meeting and I didn't fully understand it, because that's what they're there for. They need us and we need them. And when I talk to people on that level, they always say, I can call them. I say, absolutely. That's what they're there for. And so you can explore, there's the Indiana Democratic African American Caucus, which is called IDAC. And that organization is designed to educate and encourage African American to run for office. I don't know if people know that, and I can make sure that I share that information and you can include it when this podcast is presented to the public. But those are ways, those are entry points and opportunities for people who are interested in running for office. And if I didn't say that loud enough, we need people running for office, particularly people of color, young people, Gen X, millennials, to run for office, to bring those new ideas into the fold, if you will. And so those are some of the ways that you can become engaged, run for office, or get educated. Because when you have more information, you make a more informed vote. What happens to me generally this time of year, I get all these phone calls and they say, well, who should I vote for? This person, that person. What we don't realize is where I live is going to create a different ballot than from where you live. And you should do your homework, if you will, before it's time to vote or when you're in the booth. Because when it comes to, let's just say, the school board, if you have children in school, then you want to know what that person's platform is. You want to know that they're going to have some moralities around your child's education and the values that are important to you. I could go on, so I'll just stop there.
No, I do want to point out that you mentioned you're a Democratic delegate, but there are Republicans out there too. I know that my daughter, her position at where she works, she went to both the Republican and the Democratic National Convention. Yeah, and she had great experiences. Yep. And I'm going to talk about the Democratic one in a little bit, but I want to first sort of, because I know you guys were there and I know it seemed awesome and I'm so excited to hear about it. But I want to talk a little bit about you were a delegate.
Yes.
How did you become a delegate and what process does that involve?
Okay, so at the state level, I was also a delegate because you have to advance to the national. We have our convention here in Indiana, and you kind of campaign and you say, hey, I'm interested in doing this work, if you will. And what generally happens is you vote and you do endorsements. And I learned the new education of doing endorsements because that was not something I was familiar with. So we completed the state delegation and I was, elected as a state delegate. And then you have
So were the people who voted the community, or was that people in the delegation? How were you voted in?
In the bubble, if you will. You have to be a precinct committee person again to have a vote for the state. And so it evolves from the state to the national. At the state convention, you say, hey, I would love to advance and go to the national. And there are 8 people that are elected, and the rest of the delegation is selected, if you will. They have to kind of fit into certain categories so that we look like our community. And out of the 4 women, I was one of the 4 that were elected. And we're still trying to determine if this is the first time ever that all of the women elected were women of color.
Wow.
So once that
in Indiana.
In Indiana, along with 4 African American mayors, which I can't wait to talk a little bit more about later in the podcast. So that was a very special feeling. Some people peers and some not, but to have the opportunity to be elected at such a historical time was really amazing. And so once they do the election, the delegation for Indiana is 88, 4 men and 4 women, total of 8 were elected. And then we obviously advanced and traveled to Chicago and had the incredible Democratic National Convention. I don't know that we've had one in my lifetime that was as spectacular. And it wasn't just the bells and whistles and excitement of having the top of our Democratic leadership. It was the spirit. It was people excited in a way that I haven't seen in my adult life. And even though Joe Biden has had a 50-year political career, if it was not for him stepping aside, and I don't think he, did it necessarily willingly in the beginning, but he knew this was the best thing to do for our country, the excitement shifted from another white man to a woman of color, and people that I've had, endless conversations with were calling and saying how excited they were. What can I do? Can I volunteer? Or how can I support you personally? Because we know that you're headed there. And so that was new and exciting. And I've never seen or experienced that ever. And I actually have been excited about President Obama's administration, obviously. But it's just, it's a new feeling that I have not witnessed before. So,
What do you think is behind that? Or
I think that she has an it factor because, when we talk about the young people, they have the social media under their belt. She's out there. What she has to say is relevant. She's not really, I guess, scooting away from conversations that are difficult. She's taking them on. I think that some people like when there's a banter in the political arena. She's not afraid to do that. She's smart. I know she's had some criticisms as well in terms of her locking up African-American men, but I wanted to just kind of push back and say, what does a prosecutor do? That's their job. So I don't really know how to have that conversation, but I was immensely impressed with D.L. Hughley during the speeches. Maybe he was my favorite between him, President Obama, and Michelle Obama. But because of what he had to say, I thought it was incredibly powerful and honest of him to say he was wrong. He didn't do any research, and she challenged him and said, "Please, let's have this conversation." And they had a meal together, and he hasn't stopped singing her praises since. He was very poignant on Don Lemon's show about he was really disappointed in himself for not doing the proper research before going out on the public airways and just kind of crucifying her. So that was powerful to me. Of course, President Obama, he's always well stated and delivers so well on the stage. But Michelle Obama, her thing was do something. That's how she closed it. And so I have challenged myself when we're done today. I've been registering voters every chance that I get in the parks. I was honored that the Teamsters contacted me a few weeks ago and they had an event in Riverside Park. So I was able to register voters there as well. They were from California, Kentucky, Tennessee, and of course, Indiana, very well organized. Everything was free, voter registration, food, giveaways. They remembered their fallen Teamsters in the previous year. It was just a beautiful event. So that's what I've been doing. It's been a busy time, but I said I'll get rest on November 6th. We got work to do now.
So that convention really impacted you and excited you about the upcoming election, if I can.
That would be an understatement. It really impacted me. I got a chance to meet and chat with Jasmine Crockett,
Wow.
and she's the new rising star. And she's, not a on TV. She looks one way. She's a petite woman, but when I saw her, I just got so excited. She said, "Come on, sis. We got work to do." And so, just being the real deal and knowing her craft as well as she does, in and out of the political arena, she was very engaging. She also spoke at the caucus. I don't want to forget to mention the caucuses that were hosted in the
Okay.
daytime, because we really couldn't have this conversation without talking about Shirley Chisholm. And they played some footage, and I'll share it with you later. I had intended to share it beforehand about just what her journey was to become the first woman presidential candidate for the United States. And I didn't maybe fully understand the history of her journey because she was met with so much vitriol, racism, you name it. She was hit with all of those things, but she kept pressing forward.
Forward.
And they tied in one of the women's caucuses her journey to Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton also spoke very eloquently
Hmm.
and is very generous to Kamala even right now today. She could have took a different position because she didn't win and some of the things that didn't go her way, but she decided to take the higher ground and endorse her, if you will. And so being a part of the caucuses was education for me because I had maybe not forgotten, but didn't know all of the details. So they have created a path forward for Kamala. And there was just so much support in the room. I can't think of all the stars that were there, just in seats everywhere, excited to find out what they could do. They spoke from the podium and talked about the things that they were going to go back and do in their own communities. And what they were saying that's really significant is make sure we're volunteering, make sure we're voting as a family, make sure we're calling at least 10 people in our family, our circles of influence, and don't take it for granted. And have the tough conversations, the people that we normally wouldn't talk to, or the people we normally wouldn't agree with, or people who are outside of our generation, because we know them, so we have a relationship. If I call them, let's just say as a general volunteer, they can hang up on me, and sometimes they do. But when you have the relationship in place, we cannot sit this one out. We cannot pretend that it won't be tough or it won't be tiresome. In North Carolina, I hope I'm not misquoting, 720,000 people were removed from the voting register because they didn't vote in one election or something ludicrous. And so when people show up at the voting booth, if you've moved out of your congressional district, you won't be able to vote. They can't deny you vote, but it'll be a provisional vote and they don't have to count it. So you don't want to find yourself in any of those positions. The last day for the state of Indiana to register to vote is Monday, October the 7th, and then early voting will start on the 8th. And so I'm going to go out in the community today and tomorrow and hit some places that I know where people are, and just make sure that they have everything together so that they won't find themselves in a position of provisional voting or, having their vote not to count.
Thank you for listening in today. Weren't you inspired, encouraged, and uplifted? We hope so, because we're praying the best for you. Join us again next time for more betterment, because the better you are, the better you are.